Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome back. This is Christy Grayson, the nutritional health coach at our Monument Natural Grocers on Baptist Road. And I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about cravings, weight gain, and the blood sugar roller coaster. It is the beginning of the year, and most of us want to start out right. With a bachelor's in biology and a master's in education, I love providing nutrition information for all of you to be able to make the best decisions for you and your family in your health journey. This class is not about a quick and dramatic weight loss, okay? And one of the quotes I want to share with you is that the best diet for you is the one that helps you maintain a healthy weight and is sustainable. So, before we begin, this class is not intended to diagnose, treat, or mitigate any disease. Dietary supplements and foods can interact with prescription medications. So if you're taking prescription medications, please become informed about the possible interactions. As a family-owned company, our business is built on these 5 founding principles: nutrition education, high-quality standards, everyday affordable pricing, supporting our local communities, and great employees. And what we are going to focus on today is nutrition education. So in taking a look at the chart before you, I'm going to ask a hypothetical question. Can anyone guess when the low-fat dietary guidelines were implemented? If you guessed 1980, you would be correct. Some of the changes in food availability, and I would say that these aren't quite exact now, but back when that change happened to the low-fat dietary guidelines, we noticed a 38% decrease in butter, 18% decrease in eggs. Don't think those numbers would necessarily sit there now, but definitely a raise in grains and an even higher raise in sugar. And that's going to include both sucrose and high fructose corn syrup. Today, we're going to cover the following topics. We're going to talk about what is blood sugar, how do foods impact our blood sugar, overusing insulin and insulin resistance, and what can be done to support healthy blood sugar levels and insulin function. Please remember, we want to focus on understanding what's going on in our bodies and why food is such a powerful signal, and how your brain begins to crave calories when insulin becomes overused. So foods are made up of both macro and micronutrients. Macronutrients includes the fats, carbs, protein, veggies, and fruits. Actually, I'm sorry, just the fats, the carbs, and the proteins. And then when those foods are broken down in our bodies, they then release the micronutrients for our body to absorb, which include the vitamins, minerals, and the phytonutrients that those foods have. Carbs are one macronutrient that is turned into sugar in the mouth and the intestines. Fat and proteins do not turn into sugar in the intestines, so there is little to no impact on the blood sugar. The sugars enter the bloodstream and become blood sugar or blood glucose. Glucose is one of the body's fuel sources. The other is fat, which will ideally supply between 50 to 70% of the body's energy. In the average person, data indicates that more than 50% of their energy is from fatty acids when they're at rest. Every cell in the human body, from fatty acids, every cell in the human body has the ability to pull sugar or glucose from the blood and use it for cellular energy. You have about 4 grams or about a teaspoon circulating in your blood. These are tightly regulated by hormones. Blood sugar is very important to maintain at a normal level. Insulin is a hormone that is produced by the pancreas in response to eating. It essentially tells the body what to do with the calories. First, it ensures you store enough fuel to function effectively between meals. It directs some of the carbs you eat to convert fat stores for future use. The first priority is to get rid of excess sugar in the blood. You want to minimize sugar-induced damage. Fats will not be used for energy until all the excess sugar is absorbed. These two steps are how insulin controls blood sugar levels. So this slide reflects the importance of maintaining blood glucose levels and the different hormones on the left, listed on the left, that are involved in this process. One thing I'd like to point out is that cortisol does raise blood sugar levels, but it does this by causing our tissues to become insulin resistant, which can have long-term consequences for individuals under chronic stress. So let's talk about meals that can impact blood sugar in both positive and negative ways. Throughout human history, scarcity was much more of an issue than overabundance of food. Very rarely would any of the foods consumed cause rapid spikes in blood sugar. But now this is very typical of our diet. Meals that can raise blood sugar quickly include things like carbohydrate sources that lack protein, fat, or fiber. Things like refined grains, flours, pasta, low-fat or fat-free cereals, bread, bagels, low-fat or fat-free dairy, and fruit juice. These guys require an increase in insulin, and it means that they're rapidly converted into sugar in the digestive tract and quickly raise blood sugar once they're absorbed. So insulin signals to the fat cells to take up sugar, and it's converted to fat. When we have big spikes in glucose, followed by big spikes in insulin, we get lots of fat storage. So this chart is an example of what we call the blood sugar roller coaster. When we consume more glucose or sugar than our body can utilize for energy, you'll notice an increase in insulin. There is an increase in fat storage because insulin has to shuttle that excess out of the blood sugar, out of the bloodstream. You can notice increase in mood swings and brain fog. Now, to get that blood sugar down, insulin is going to shuttle things either into the cells for energy or into fat storage. And when that blood sugar drops, most of the time it's going to be below that normal level. And you see that normal level on this chart in that green area between about 75 to 110 milligrams per deciliter. Well, when we have that low end of the blood sugar, we have that stress hormone cortisol that comes into play, as you'll remember from the previous slide. It increases its release, which can also increase our cravings, things like potato chips, caffeine, sugar, processed foods. Can increase fatigue and that brain fog of feeling like we've hit a wall and we can't focus and we have to reread a sentence 2 or 3 times. And this process can go on all day long. Now, meals that can allow for a steady, healthy blood sugar balance include protein and fat because they have minimal, if any, impacts on the blood sugar. Blood sugar-friendly carbohydrate sources, right, mostly from those starchy vegetables, some legumes, full-fat dairy, and then many fruits. And it's really about the quality of the meal rather than the ingredients. Very few traditional cultures consume meals with high carbohydrate content. The carbohydrates that are found in meals and foods from traditional cultures were either loaded with fiber to help or consumed in conjunction with other macronutrients to minimize the blood sugar spike they cause. The fat stores were then able to fulfill any energy requirements that occurred between meals, because remember, your body's not going to access that sugar stored away in fat until all of the excess glucose is out of the bloodstream. So here is an example of healthy blood sugar balance. And you'll notice that there are some, what I would call is like slow rolling ups and downs within that normal blood sugar level, still when you eat, but you'll notice that it is maintained within the normal level. There are smaller amounts of insulin being released, and the fat can be utilized for fuel in that lower amount of time in between meals. And how we do this is we're going to focus on a quality balanced diet that includes a quality source of protein, healthy fat, loads of diverse vegetables, and little to no caffeine. As you can see with the green tea, we'll have some caffeine in that. It's just an example. When we are maintaining normal blood sugar level, we have a decrease in fat storage because it's not necessary, more steady moods, steady energy. We don't have that excess cortisol being released to get our blood sugar back up, decrease in cravings, and we're able to think more clearly. Overusing insulin indicates that we are consuming foods that spike our blood sugar. Because insulin's message is to move into storage mode, it not only stores away glucose, but also suppresses fat burning. Large insulin secretions cause all our fuel stores to be locked away, and our cells become starved for energy when insulin is elevated and or over-excreted. Insulin resistance and overusing insulin can lead to insulin resistance, weight gain, abdominal obesity, cravings, hunger, fatigue, and even brain fog. Large decreases in glucose availability can stimulate food intake or an increase in appetite. Things like hunger, cravings, exhaustion, increase in fat storage, increase in blood pressure, and increase in inflammation, and a suppression of the brain's healing mechanisms, which can also include an increase in amyloid plaques being created in the brain. Our brain panics. It stresses our body, and it starts to make glucose out of amino acids, typically from muscle, increases our appetite stimulation. So what causes insulin resistance? Major contributors include diets high in refined carbs, inflammation, like an increase in the intake of omega-6s, lack of physical activity or exercise, which is very important to help us use stored glucose and stimulates our muscles to take up extra glucose from the bloodstream, and stress and cortisol, and even a lack of sleep can produce excess cortisol. In the ingestion and exposure to pesticides, which are known as endocrine disruptors, and insulin is actually an endocrine hormone. Once a person becomes insulin resistant, insulin can no longer do its job in the body, and glucose cannot be pulled out of the bloodstream. Tissues become insulin resistant at different rates throughout this process. The body tries to overcome insulin resistance by producing more and more insulin. Muscle contributes about 60 to 70% of the insulin-mediated glucose uptake. As muscle becomes resistant, extra glucose in the bloodstream accumulates. The first cells to become insulin resistant are muscle cells, then the liver, and when muscle is insulin resistant, glucose must be stored by fat cells and the liver. Excess glucose in the bloodstream is essentially toxic. This is why the body works so hard to store it away for later use. As liver cells take up the extra glucose, they are placed under tremendous stress and begin to produce inflammation and other hormones. Fat cells eventually become the primary storage tissue for excess blood glucose, and they begin to grow leading to fat deposition around the waist. Even during fasting, blood glucose remains on the high end of normal, leading to inflammation and cardiovascular damage. And because there are not as many tissues able to store glucose and insulin doesn't work as well as it should, blood glucose levels remain high for much longer than is healthy. Elevated blood glucose 2 hours after a meal is a direct indicator of tissue damage. Overconsumption of simple refined carbs and increase in LDL particles and triglycerides are all major indicators of cardio concerns. The Framingham study has shown that your risk of obesity and cardiovascular disease both go up based on your sugar intake. In fact, the obesity goes up by 200% for those consuming the most sugar. And more than 70% of patients with type 2 diabetes die of cardiovascular causes, showing how dysregulation of our ability to regulate sugar leads to significant cardiovascular issues down the line. So this is an example of what that insulin resistant state looks like. And basically what it means is that insulin kind of stops answering the call to be released. And so you'll notice that that blood glucose level keeps going higher and higher and higher, and insulin kind of stops answering the call to help shuttle that excess glucose out of the bloodstream and into the fat cells. And this is not an area where we want to be. So why is high blood sugar levels so harmful? The excessive sugar in the blood sticks to proteins on our cells and impairs the ability of those cells to function. And we call them advanced glycation end products, or AGEs for short. AGEs contribute to accelerated aging, inflammation, and insulin resistance. Insulin resistance has been linked to increased risk of cardiovascular disease. As we become insulin resistant, our metabolism is damaged and does not function properly, impairing normal fat and cholesterol metabolism. And when these factors are compounded with the inflammation produced by high blood sugar levels, numerous disease processes take place. And over on the right, there was a New York Times article published. They published an expose showing how in the 50s, the sugar industry paid researchers to shift that blame over to fat. Long-term insulin resistance leads to death of insulin-producing pancreatic beta cells, which causes type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes can lead to cognitive dysfunction, eye and retina damage, cardiovascular damage, obesity and weight gain, kidney damage, skin conditions, nerve damage, and even impaired healing. And insulin resistance can even occur in people without diabetes. Americans have been following, at least partially for the last 50 years, an increase in those simple carbs and a decrease in saturated fat intake. Mostly this was in the form of potatoes, rice, cereals, pasta, breads, and all of those, you'll remember, rapidly turn into sugar in the bloodstream. And we can see that we're not getting healthier with these recommendations. Diabetes has increased over 700% in the last 50 years by some estimates. We're even seeing a rise in 11 to 18-year-olds. Insulin resistance is thought to underpin the development of metabolic syndrome, which has been defined as having 3 of the 5 following criteria: abdominal obesity, hypertriglyceridemia, low high-density lipoprotein, hypertension, high fasting glucose. It's estimated to affect 20 to 25% of the US population. So what do we eat to support healthy blood sugar balance? Well, we want to focus on quality foods and natural whole foods, limiting our processed foods, things like in a bag or a box. Every meal, we want to have half of our plate filled with colorful vegetables, couple servings of fruits, quality protein, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, and healthy fats. And over to the right, you'll see an example of one of our healthy meal wheels, a great resource and tool to have on your refrigerator if you are a meal planner, or even if you're not a meal planner. They're just great tools to have around. We want to focus, we want to avoid or minimize for weight management those higher or optional carbs, and because these guys have the greatest effect on our blood sugar. We want to focus more instead on those starchy vegetables, which are more nutrient dense, whereas grains are less nutrient dense, and they contain things like lectins and phytates, which are very difficult to digest in our system and then to absorb the nutrition out of those grains. Also, an overload in those lectins and phytates can cause inflammation, immune system activation or disruption, mood and behavior disruption. They can contribute to insulin resistance and elevated blood sugar, gut inflammation, dysfunction, damage, and a decrease in micronutrient absorption. So one little interesting exercise you can try is called the Saltine cracker test to see what your carbohydrate intake should be like based on your genetics and ancestry. Now, before I read this little exercise, it should be noted that not everyone responds the same to the same food. There is an entire science devoted to understanding how your genetics influence your carbohydrate tolerance and how carbs affect your blood sugar. So here's the gist of the exercise. So there's a test that you can do with a plain unsalted saltine cracker, or if you're gluten-free, a small dime-sized piece of raw potato. Whenever you're ready, place the cracker or the potato in your mouth and start timing and chewing. You'll need to pay really close attention now, as the starch in the cracker or potato may already be starting to be digested by amylase, which is an enzyme in your saliva. If you feel yourself wanting to swallow, that's perfectly normal, but try to stop yourself and try to imagine that you're simply chewing a piece of gum as you keep chewing. As soon as you detect a change in taste, or if you reach 30 seconds while timing, stop chewing, swallow, and note the time. Rerun the same self-test 2 more times. Now, you'll add up the 3 times, divide by 3 so that you get your average. If the cracker changed and became sweet almost immediately, you're a full carbohydrate digester and probably do okay with carbs. Here are the other categories. 0 to 14 seconds will the taste until the taste change, full carbohydrate digester. 15 to 30 seconds until the taste change, a moderate carbohydrate digester. And more than 30 seconds until taste change, a restricted carbohydrate digester. Now, most people have an enzyme within their saliva, which I previously mentioned, called amylase, and it's like a giant pair of shearing scissors. It has the ability to cut apart big and bulky starch molecules into simple sugars. That's the first step in making big threads of starch molecules available for your body to use easily as energy. And amylase is really good at cutting up starch. So kind of a neat little exercise. So let's take a moment and talk about those quality fats and proteins. Healthy fats include things like butter, if you digest it well, coconut oil, palm, olive, avocado, sesame oil, cream, ghee, and grass-fed tallow. Healthy fat is used to cook with, garnish food, and is a component of a quality protein, which we consider that from an animal source. So say like a steak, for example. Not to mention that healthy fats make vegetables taste so much better. And they help us to absorb all those vitamins, minerals, and nutrients especially the fat-soluble vitamins, and they help us, our bodies absorb them and utilize them more efficiently. Now, quality protein is going to be from animals that are raised on their natural diets and able to exhibit their natural behaviors. That means that they're able to roam in the field and eat grass. So dairy from pasture-based cows, meat from grass-fed cattle, and eggs from pasture-raised chickens all have healthier nutritional profiles than conventional products. And what do I mean by conventional? I mean in things like feedlots. Those guys are also oftentimes given antibiotics and hormones. They're also given genetically modified corn and soy oftentimes, things that they were never created to eat in their natural diet. Protein and fat provide non-carbohydrate calories and stimulate the production of important hormones that tell the body we're full and help to support balanced blood sugar. Quality protein also contains amino acids that travel to the brain and help regulate appetite. And when you look to the plate on the right, you'll notice that it's about, if you're going to guesstimate, about a palm size of quality protein is what you want to focus on at each meal. Most of us grew up being told that foods like red meat, eggs, and bacon raise our cholesterol levels. This idea is so deeply ingrained in our thinking that many don't give it a second thought. But is it true? So what about saturated fat? Well, did you know that saturated fat has many health benefits? It has a neutral effect on the HDL to LDL ratio. Saturated fatty acids are the preferred fuel for the heart. Sugar raises only LDL cholesterol. It's really the sugar that we're focused, right? Fats found in butter and coconut oil support our immune system, and coconut oil contains special fats that can provide quick and stable energy. What about fruit, right? So some fruits do have more sugar than others, and dried fruit has especially high amounts of sugar per gram. So you can focus on some of those lower sugar options like cranberries, avocado, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, apples, and peaches. They have those naturally occurring sugar, which would be preferable. They also include things like healthy source of carbohydrates, antioxidants, vitamins and minerals, and that fiber, which is going to be very helpful. You can even add fat or protein to minimize the impact on your blood sugar. So some examples, one of my favorites would be coconut cream or coconut milk added with some blueberries or raspberries and a dash of cinnamon on top. Really yummy treat. Almond butter and an apple. You can even add some of those fruits into unsweetened yogurt instead of getting like the fruit yogurt that's already ready. It's going to be much higher sugar count. And you can even add cheese, right? Some cheese to some of your fruit. You're getting some of that protein and that healthy fat. This is just an example of what kind of delicious nutrition-packed breakfast that you can have and kind of the nutrient profile where you're getting a good amount of protein, getting some good fiber in there, good amount of fat, which will hopefully this kind of meal is going to keep you satiated very well until lunchtime. All kinds of things that you can do with this, and you're getting your vegetables in, because sometimes people are like, vegetables for breakfast, what am I going to do? But there's lots of options where you can start to incorporate those guys. So we start secreting insulin the moment we think about eating. Non-caloric sweeteners do not contain any calories, but they still may cause the body to make insulin, locking all fuel sources away so cells are hungry. This causes us to feel hungry sooner, crave sweet and fatty foods to replace the calories we have stored away. You can see how this would be, this would get us into trouble. So artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose are not the solution. Our bodies have the normal hormonal response to sweet food, even if it does not contain calories. Sweet taste causes more insulin secretion. And even worse, many artificial sweeteners disrupt the delicate microbial balance that exists in our digestive tract. This balance influences inflammation and appetite. And one piece I always like to also remind is that, about 60 to 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So we want to keep our gut nice and healthy. Now, it has been stated that usually things like stevia and monk fruit which are naturally derived sweeteners, do not affect the blood sugar in the same way. And for many, do not impact the blood sugar. However, every person is unique, every person is different. So you just need to listen to your body. So we want to train our body to burn fat by avoiding carbohydrates that can spike our blood sugar and foods that damage our ability to regulate blood glucose. So we want to stay away from those damaging foods like artificial sweeteners and trans fats, hydrogenated oils, omega-6 fats and vegetable oils, processed foods. We want to exercise caution with high glycemic fruits and vegetables, fat-free and low-fat dairy, agave, and high fructose foods. And just to note, the high glycemic foods, those would be foods that process very quickly into sugar in our blood. And we want to avoid the high glycemic foods like refined grains, sweetened beverages with added sugar, fat-free sweetened dairy, and these are just some examples. Remember, our brains are wired to enjoy sugar. I confess, I like it too. It's not an easy task to give up sugar or grains. They're the two most addictive foods that we eat. Sugar stimulates the pleasure centers of the brain, and lectins from the grains attach to opiate receptors. Fats and proteins can help with sugar cravings, so prepare foods that contain fat and protein and have them ready for when a craving strikes. Balance your blood sugar and don't go hungry, and ask yourself, am I hungry or do I just want sugar? You want to plan. Planning out what you will eat will prevent temptation and ensure that you have a healthy food ready. Prepare. Preparing food ahead of time when you have the time and energy is essential for your success. And you want to pack food with you and bring some extras so that when you're caught in a situation, you're prepared and you have another option so that you don't have to kind of cave, if you will. And if you need some support or ideas, then please utilize us nutritional health coaches. We're at almost every single natural grocers, and we're here to support you for free with one-on-one coaching and classes and information, because we really want to help. So some other tips and tricks you can consider would be incorporating apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar has been shown to slow the breakdown and absorption of carbohydrates, slowing the rise in blood sugar after a meal. Utilizing resistant starches. They are formed when a starch, like a potato, is cooked and then cooled. It is not broken down in the intestines, so it won't contribute to blood sugar. If it processes differently and is more kind of food for the gut health. Focus on foods that provide dietary fiber, fat, and protein, as these nutrients are not directly turned into blood sugar and can slow the absorption of carbohydrates from a meal. You can also consider things like OPCs, which an example would be grape seed extract, and other polyphenols that can actually slow the breakdown of carbohydrates in the intestines, supporting healthy blood sugar balance. The best supplements for supporting healthy blood sugar balance work in several different fashions. And so today we're gonna review fish oil, magnesium, and vitamin D. Now, just to note, some supplements that support insulin function would be chromium, milk thistle, NAC or N-acetylcysteine, and biotin. Supplements that support health in those with high blood sugar include alpha lipoic acid, vitamin C, and green tea extract. Supplements that are helpful for energy production include things like magnesium, zinc, B-complex vitamins, carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine, CoQ10, and vitamin K. So let's start with fish oil. Fish oil works through multiple mechanisms to support healthy blood sugar levels. It modulates inflammation through multiple pathways, supports a healthy body weight and composition, and helps those cells listen to the message sent by insulin. Vitamin D supports healthy blood sugar balance through multiple functions via inflammation, insulin function, and beta cell health. In fat cells, vitamin D modulates inflammation. It supports a healthy microbial balance, which is a factor that is critical for healthy levels of inflammation. Vitamin D helps muscle cells respond to insulin. Supports of insulin function obtained from the modest exercise can be augmented by vitamin D supplementation. Vitamin D supports the health of insulin-producing pancreatic beta cells, and it regulates calcium levels, which control insulin release. Doctors believe there's a link between vitamin D and type 2 diabetes because studies have shown that people who have the lowest vitamin D levels in their blood are at an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes later in life. They also noticed that people newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes often have lower levels of vitamin D than people without diabetes. Chromium and magnesium both work at multiple steps inside the cell to help it respond effectively to the signals from insulin. Magnesium has the added benefit of modulating inflammation throughout the body, and it also has been shown to support the liver's ability to produce glucose, preventing blood sugar from bottoming out. Many do not get enough magnesium, especially with the state of our soil health today. These supplements are particularly important for people who have dietary deficiencies or poor gut health, which can lead to low levels of magnesium or chromium in the body. So let's focus on a few lifestyle tips and tricks. Sleep and exercise being two very important ones to focus on. Lack of sleep has been linked to weight gain, insulin resistance, and an increased amount of cortisol. You want to aim to get 7 to 9 hours per night in a completely dark environment, even if you need to use an eye mask or blackout curtains. It's also really good practice to make sure all electronics are removed from your bedroom. Exercise is completely important. You want to make sure that you're physically active, up moving, even maybe walking 10 minutes per day, but I would even say just making sure you are active throughout the entire day because we know that a lot of us sit a lot, so it is important for us to be moving. Spend about 1 to 5 hours per week moving briskly. Perform resistance training and heavy lifting, and sprint or move quickly once per week. Eating simply, so we're going to do a little summary here because we've talked about a lot of information. And eating simple carbohydrates puts us on the blood sugar roller coaster. It elevates our insulin and overuses insulin in our bodies. We get put into fat storage and we don't burn it because we're constantly replenishing that glucose in the bloodstream. Can lead to weight gain, food cravings, exhaustion, and mood issues. All right. Instead, what do we want to do? We want to eat a healthy and delicious diet with quality protein, healthy fat, loads of vegetables. We want to focus, instead of eating on simple carbs, we want to eat some of those more complex starchy carbs, but making sure that our plate is balanced, again, with that protein and healthy fat. Utilize supplements and lifestyle changes to help to support healthy blood sugar levels. And we want to remember that we've got to focus on our sleep and our exercise. And if you need help, definitely we have all kinds of resources that are available. They're incredible resources. And in addition to books, in addition to what we call customer literature files on various topics, you've also got access to our nutritional health coaches like me. We're here to do one-on-one coaching sessions. We're here to do classes. We're here to provide you the information. And if we don't know it, then we want to look it up. And one other note I want to tell you guys, very exciting news. We're about to kick off 21 Days to a Healthier You. And it is going to be at my store. It will be an in-store class. I'll be teaching a 3-class series. The first class will start Saturday, January 29th from 11 to 12. And what we're going to be doing each week has a different theme. So class 1 is going to be Eat for Health and Vitality. Class 2 will be Kick the Sugar Cravings, and Class 3 will be Detoxify Your Life. I'd really love for you to join me. And if you're not comfortable joining in person, there are ways for you to do it virtually. And so reach out to us, figure out how to sign up. You can go to our website, naturalgrocers.com/21-days, and you'll find more information there. Thank you so much